Hello, my name is Tony Swain, and I'm a senior probation officer with the Irish Probation Service. I'm going to introduce you to Module 5 of the Copper Probation Volunteer Training Programme on observation and interpretation. As a volunteer in probation, it's very important that you're able to observe in your interactions with probation clients and also interpret from that observation. So we'll get started. The outline and learning goals of this module are as follows. So as I said, we're going to look at observation and interpretation. So what is observation and what is interpretation, and how do we do both of those well? We're also going to look at subjectivity and objectivity, which are two important concepts when it comes to observation and interpretation. Subjectivity, and we're going to look at what it is and how we remain balanced in our interactions with clients. We're going to look at types of bias and how this might impact how we observe, interpret, and interact with clients. And then we're going to look at objectivity. We're going to look at what it is and how we promote it. Obviously, it's very important to be objective as possible in our interactions with clients. So we're going to give some tips on how to do that. Okay, so firstly, observation and interpretation. So through working with a client, we gain insight into their well-being, their attitude, and their behavior. So we learn a lot through our interaction, our engagement with clients. Obviously, probation clients can present with various difficulties and challenges, and they can present with problems in relation to their well-being. So it's important that we're attuned to that, and that we're able to pick up on their well-being and how they're doing and what their attitudes are. Obviously, a lot of probation clients present with difficulties in terms of antisocial attitudes, pro-criminal attitudes. We want to be able to assess that as much as possible, to get an understanding of what their attitudes are, and to support the process of change in developing more pro-social, anti-criminal attitudes, and also their behavior as well. We're observing and interpreting how they behave. So by gaining information through conversation and observing behavior, we build connections with our clients, and connections are crucial, and relationships were covered in a previous module. So it's important that we develop a positive working relationship with our clients. We develop positive connections, and we're able to draw conclusions from that contact, from that relationship, from their presentation, through our conversations and what we observe. And this is interpretation. So that drawing conclusion from the observation is interpretation. It's important to actually describe what the behavior is, and to be influenced as little as possible by subjective experiences. So we want to be very specific in terms of what the behavior is, what the attitude is perhaps that we're hearing, that we're seeing. So to be very, I suppose, evidence in I suppose our interpretation and the conclusions that we draw. So we're being specific in what we describe. Observation is a conscious process, so it's important that we're very, I suppose, alert, that it's deliberate, that we're observing, we're gathering information at all times through all our contacts, all our interactions, our conversations, what we witness, that we're very deliberate in that, and we're gathering information to support our work with the client. I suppose we observe actions, attitudes, behaviors, interactions, events, so a whole range of things. So in terms of how the client is behaving, how they're acting, how they're presenting, what their attitudes are, those prevailing attitudes around their behavior, around particular problems in relation to their offending. We're looking at how they interact with us, how they interact with others, any difficulties that might be present there, and how they respond to the various life events as well. So the research has shown that many decisions or judgments are made unconsciously, and we all engage in I suppose, unconscious decisions and judgments, and we're all, I suppose, shaped by our environments, by our relationships, our backgrounds, our family environment, and I suppose biases can creep in as a result of that, and we might be very unaware that those biases exist. So it's important that we I suppose we check our biases, that we question our kind of our decisions, our judgments, and as much as possible avoid the risk of bias creeping in and negatively impacting our interaction with clients. So biases are I suppose, arise because of unconscious association. We might associate a particular client, with a particular kind of judgment that we have about other people who might have a similar experience, who might come from a similar background. Often emotions and feelings might creep in to the bias, and maybe situational factors as well. So very kind of specific factors that in relation to the situation might impact our judgment. Okay, we're going to now look at subjectivity. Subjectivity is the process of how a person's judgment and behaviors are informed by feelings and personal opinions rather than external factors. So it's very much influenced by, as we say, feelings and opinions rather than kind of factual evidence. And as much as possible, I suppose, obviously, evidence is important, that we're able to stand over our judgments, that we're able to stand over our decisions with, I suppose, specific concrete evidence rather than just emotions and feelings and perhaps biases, as we said previously. So subjectivity bias refers to the personal biases or prejudices that individuals have that can influence their perception, interpretation, and evaluation of information. And as I said, we all can have biases for different reasons, and we're all influenced, by our environments, by our backgrounds, and our socialization. But again, being alert to the potential of bias is what's important. And that we're not negatively impacted, and our relationships and response to our clients is not negatively impacted by the possible presence of a bias. Okay, so different types of biases that might exist. So we have here two examples: the anchoring effect and confirmation bias. So firstly, the anchoring effect. So this is the reliance on an initial value or judgment, which you may have previously heard in relation to the client you're working with. So perhaps the individual who puts you in touch with the client, who allocates you to work with the client, might have given some information in relation to the client, might have indicated that the client is difficult, is particularly challenging, or there's a particular problem present. And this might very much impact how you see the client and how you develop a relationship with the client. And you might be slightly blind to kind of other factors, other concerns that might exist, other problems, if you were, I suppose, initially kind of a particular problem was highlighted at the outset. Confirmation bias, I suppose, when we have an initial idea about a cause for a problem or an idea around why something might be how we see it, we tend to cling to that first impression. So we look for information that confirms the first image, while we ignore or disregard information that refutes that image. And we do not actively take it into account in our judgment. So we're very much kind of focused on our initial kind of thoughts around what the problem area is, the cause of the problem, and what the solution might be. And we're not looking at other areas or other potential explanations for the problem. So some top tips to address the bias. So we can test it out, I suppose, through our interactions with the client. We can see, if in fact, I suppose, that is the problem area, or that is the cause of the problem. We can kind of ask questions around a particular area to see if our initial kind of thoughts around the problem are in fact true. We obviously, having contact with the individual, with the client, is important, and developing that relationship and gaining I suppose, a broader understanding of their circumstances, of their problem areas. I suppose that will help in terms of understand whether or not our initial kind of thinking around the situation is in fact correct. We can obviously countering stereotypes is important. Being aware of societal stereotypes in relation to particular groups. Obviously, probation clients can come from a range of backgrounds and have a range of different challenges. And we want to obviously counter any stereotypes that might be in existence in relation to particular groups in society. Obviously, taking perspective and looking at alternative perspectives is important, and seeing, is there another way of viewing the situation, of viewing the client's circumstances, in viewing a particular problem. Slowing things down and not rushing to conclusions is important. I suppose getting to know the client, developing that relationship, gathering a broad range of information and evidence to support our judgments and our decisions. And then challenging, I suppose, any bias that might exist. I suppose challenging ourselves and questioning ourselves in relation to our thoughts around a particular situation. Okay, next we're going to look at objectivity. So objectivity obviously is the other side of subjectivity. It's based on facts, whereas subjectivity is based on opinions. So objectivity is not based on opinions, it's not based on influences or motives. We want to promote objectivity. Obviously, it's important to be, I suppose, very much factual and based on evidence. Opinions are important too, but obviously we need to be they need to be backed up by evidence and not influenced by bias, as we discussed. So we promote objectivity by consulting with others. We might consult with our line manager, with a colleague, another volunteer perhaps working in probation, and we get alternative perspectives, alternative views, which is important. We want to consider all factors in a person's life, so we don't just focus and hone in on one particular problem area or what we might see to be the primary problem area, because often that might be incorrect, and I suppose probation clients present with a range of difficulties, and it's important that I suppose they're all addressed in some way. Obviously, they're prioritized. But we want to look at a whole range of factors and respond in a holistic way, and in a way that I suppose meets the needs of the client. So we do not assess or judge based on just one particular factor. I suppose we assess and we judge based on a whole range of factors. Completing a written report can help with objectivity. So after each session, after each contact with the probation client, we might prepare a structured report that forces us to consider multiple aspects of the client's presentation and life, and hopefully will ensure, I suppose, that evidence is included, I suppose, to support those judgments and decisions. Having knowledge of specific areas such as addiction and psychiatric needs or marginalized communities can help. So if we understand, I suppose, where the client is coming from, what their problem area is, we have an understanding of that. And if we understand, I suppose, addiction and mental health, that will help us evaluate the client's presentation. If their mood is particularly low, we'll have an understanding of that within the mental health context. If they're presenting under the influence of alcohol or drugs, a knowledge of that will help in our judgment and in our assessment. Okay, so just some concluding remarks before we finish. So observing a client is an active and extremely valuable practice. So again, it's very much active, it's deliberate, it's very much conscious. We're gathering information, we're observing, and we're very much alert to the client's presentation, to their behaviors, their attitudes, their values, all these things. Interpreting what is observed requires consideration, balance, and knowledge. So we want to interpret what we're observing, but we need to do that, I suppose, in a considered way, in a balanced way, and using our knowledge as well. Good practice, I suppose, both in observing and interpreting, is a balance of objective and subjective analysis. So both are important, both the objective and the subjective, but we need to be careful that the subjective isn't influenced by bias, even if it is unconscious. There are risks in only being informed by subjective experiences, as there are risks in only using objective measures. So we want to get a balance, include both the objective and the subjective. But as I said, the subjective needs to be evidenced, and I suppose we need to minimize the risk of bias. So that is the session on observation and interpretation. Thank you for your time, and best of luck with the training. Thank you.